Purpose Lifestyle magazine covers and features stories in business and entrepreneurship, education, performing arts, sports, community outreach, fashion, travel and real estate, health and wellness, and more. Contact us at info@vnpmagazine.com, or you can reach out to our Director of Sales, Ms. Karen McConnell-Jones, at 202-904-1000. Vision and purpose, inspiring our community.
So here we are, Shauna. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you have been enjoying our brief recollection of some experiences we have had with parenting. Shauna, what do you think? What comes to your mind as we talk about this subject of the Parent Chronicles?
There's some things that parents should really kind of talk about, almost like a support group, to kind of help each other out, especially, during these past, 6 months since we've been at home.
Yes.
Parenting through a pandemic. I don't know. That might have to be a book or a blog.
I was going to say that sounds like a book. Oh my gosh.
We have to work on that one. Because things are different, and to be able to say, what are you doing in the relationship? I know it's been wonderful being able to spend more time with my children where it's not been the rush to and from places. I think when I look back prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of me feeling like an Uber. All right, we got to go here. All right, time's up, then go here. Time for school, time for this, time for church, time for this, time for that. And, it was a lot of that. And now we've been able to sit down and we play Uno and we play Battleship and then we watch movies and, just getting to know my children as little people, has really been great as a family here. But I'd be lying to you to tell you that there weren't times I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
let me help this house, or put them somewhere else. Let me have a break.
Right.
And there are challenges with each stage, and as we said, earlier, we kind of just learn from what we know. We learn from what we've seen, and there's some things that we talked earlier about some of the things that we've said or things that we've heard. It's like, okay, what's really going to be good in our household? What's something that's going to work for raising our children?
Mm-hmm. And when you say that, I had mentioned the National Family Resiliency Center before we took our break. And I guess I've been involved with them since 2003. You were involved with them and you invited me to participate. And we shared these workshops with parents monthly to talk about things related, not so much how to parent, but basically how to co-parent to navigate the challenges associated with separation and divorce, and yet be mindful consistently about doing what's in the best interest of the child. And discipline was one of the things that really engaged people to want to talk, because there was so much about, you had mentioned it earlier, even though you're married, you both may have different views on how to raise a child. One of the things I talked about in the presentations was the fact, even in being together under the same roof didn't guarantee necessarily y'all would agree on everything. So we shouldn't allow our disagreements to create havoc now that we're not together. And it's because of what you mentioned, the fact that we have different ways or views in how we were raised that may want to be different when we're parents. Or I want to do these things because they work for me, and the other person has a different view. And I know one of the topics that you're interested in talking about on the subject of discipline is spare the rod, spoil the child. So I'm curious to hear what motivates you to want to address that.
Well, it's really more when you think about what you said earlier about Cosby, I brought you in this world, I take you out. We all laugh at that. And that's, it's funny to hear that one. And then, so I remember even when we were doing NFRC, when you talk about discipline, and it can be a touchy subject. You tell parents to spank or not to spank. And we can be like, we ain't allowed to spank our kids anymore. They'll call CPS on you and stuff like that, and it's interesting because there are some people who strongly believe, absolutely, you should absolutely never, strike a child. And there's other people who are like, oh, no, you absolutely do. And the Bible supports it. And what's the scripture that is used for that is exactly that. Spare the rod, spoil the child. And, you know, I remember being in a conversation with some other parents at one particular time and said, the spare the rod, spoil the child scripture, to say, think about it, to spare the rod, to what is a rod, and think about where else in the Bible do you see us talk about a rod? And what immediately comes to mind for me is the 23rd Psalm.
Mm-hmm.
And that 23rd Psalm, the rod and thy staff, they comfort me, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They comfort me. And the conversation kind of led to, is that really what that scripture is saying? And I'm not here to, you know, to break that down. It's just something is to think about, to say, I know for me, you know, what I saw growing up in most of my friends' households and stuff like that, yes, we didn't want to get in trouble because we knew what might happen to us when we got home.
Right.
And that was just a normal part. Now, I think, I know my children, if, you know, they will say about their friends, that's not something necessarily that they would expect necessarily their friends. It's not as much of a commonplace to say, oh yeah, spanking is what might happen, and maybe more of a timeout or something like that. But again, do those things change with the times? And then why do we change them? Why do we make the decisions to do what we do with our children? I think it's just something we should be intentional about thinking about.
Yeah, and I would say for myself, you know, I can count on one hand how many times I was spanked as a child, and I did get them. And I talked to my kids about it, and one definitely was justified. I stole money from my mother twice. My kids are like, yeah, no, my kids are like, what? You stole money? And I said, yep. The first time she didn't catch me, but the second time she did. So I knew that one was coming. You know, I understood that one. But one time I can also remember when I got spanked and I didn't deserve it. Somebody lied on me, but that was okay. Mm-hmm. One of my siblings, I'm not going to mention any names, but
they know who they are. They know who they are.
It's funny because before this show, my kids actually asked me why I didn't spank them growing up. And I said to them, I never thought you did anything that warranted a spanking. Now, I did hit them on the hand when I was upset with something that they did. They did get a one or two taps on the hand. Mm-hmm. But I noticed my children, when I would talk with them about how I felt because of what they did, that mm-hmm. to me was like a spanking for them. Mm-hmm. They definitely, you could see the grief they felt over disappointing their dad.
Mm. That's interesting. But Cortland, and you're a teacher. We both work with kids now. We're gonna go ahead and get real here. Have you ever encountered a teenager whose attitude was just so disrespectful that you were like, "Is his mom? I wish it."
Oh, girl,
okay, come on now.
Look, you don't even have to finish that. You don't even got to ask the question. I know exactly where you're going.
Where we're like, maybe we don't need to get rid of that, because sometimes it just feels like, you know, we're not a matter of being scared of anything, but having a level of respect for someone. And you don't want to have to feel like that's what you have to do to demand respect. But, you know, sometimes I wonder, have things changed so much that, you know, kids see themselves on the exact same levels as adults, can say, do, disrespect adults with no recourse at all. I mean, you know, again, I'm not promoting or saying it's wrong one way. I'm just something to think about.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, because I think every child obviously is going to be reared or raised a different way. Mm-hmm. And so this is not to suggest in any way that parents should or shouldn't. But I think for my children, looking at my children and what you're saying, I saw an alternative means that I thought accomplished the same goal in instilling the discipline. Because you and I know the word discipline means to teach.
To teach.
So I always felt, even if I hit my kids on the hand, if I spanked them, whatever form of discipline that I felt I was going to use, it was important that I explained to them why they were mm-hmm. getting hit on the hand or why they were getting spanked. Mm-hmm. They needed to understand the consequence mm-hmm. with the hope that it would motivate them to not want to continue the behavior that brought about the consequence.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think that's a hot topic that I don't think we always talk about openly. I don't know if it's taboo. You don't necessarily ask a parent, "Hey, do you spank your child?" Or, don't you, we
Right,
don't get into those
right.
types of things.
When you're at work at the water cooler, that's not a conversation that just pops up.
Oh, no, we don't do that. But to be able to just be able to feel like you can, share some thoughts, because one of the things I do agree with, and I remember one of the things, and, even at my church, we had a conversation with parents one time, and one of the things we did agree on is for those folks who did say, spanking might be something that they did, that it was not to be done in anger.
Right.
When you're on, and when you're on 10, and
Yeah.
you're really, really upset, that's not the time
Right.
to be that, because that can definitely be a slippery slope when it comes to some other things. So that's just one of the topics that I think is how we're going to talk about some other stuff, but that one's a big one, don't you think?
Oh,
And
definitely.
I want to go ahead and put out there. So since Cortland said this is going to be one of two, between this airing and the next show, please, in the comments, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching the replay, if there's some parent topics you want us to chat about, there's something you want us, you want our views on it, our thoughts about it, please put it in the comment box and share that with us. We'd love to hear from you, because I know there's a lot of parents out there and y'all dealing with some stuff. Now, we're not counselors. That's not who we're saying to be. But if you'd like to chat about something, wouldn't you want to hear about that too, Cortland?
Yes. I definitely would love to hear from people, their thoughts, anything that we shared, or just giving their own opinion or feedback on a particular subject, because I do believe these are conversations and dialogues that do need to take place. A lot of what we're doing with this podcast, for me, is inspired from Focus on the Family and Family Life Today. And I just believe that these are things that are valuable for helping communities and families thrive, which is the motivation for what we do with our nonprofit, The Better Place.
Yeah. And, I'm going to, because we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to throw another one at you real quick. Children should be seen and not heard.
Not heard. Oh, yeah. Yeah. How about that, huh?
That was another one that I know I heard, and it was usually because it was the grown folks talking, right?
Right.
It's grown folks, or get out of grown folks' business.
Right. And then listening to what you're saying, so the topic of communication, I would say for me, was huge with my kids. Mm-hmm. Being able to establish healthy, open lines of communication. And I think as a parent, what does that mean to make sure that open lines of communication are established? Mm-hmm. And so now that my children are young adults, one thing I would say is we can't say that that's something we desire or seek, but then when they want to start talking about dating, we tell them we don't want to talk about that.
Okay.
So, and I'm bringing that up only because, our kids, I knew beforehand working with teenagers that this eventually would be a subject that would come up. So it was my work with teenagers that actually helped me to be open to these topics that I knew would be kind of difficult to have as a parent with your children. And so it led to my son writing a book on the subject of dating, which his sister contributed content to. But that was because a teenager, when I was working on the high school level, showed me a book on dating that allowed me to plan in advance how we were going to have this conversation with our own children. Mm-hmm. And one of the strategies that I used when they were real young was hug break. And what that meant was we could be doing whatever, and I would come into the room and be like, hug break, and everybody would stop and just give each other a hug. So that physical affirmation, nonverbal communication that you're loved and you're valued.
Right.
And we still hug each other today because of that. And then when they became teens, mm-hmm. so they could feel comfortable, the conversations were had over dinner at a restaurant instead of, in the routine of things. And then I started taking them out separately so they could feel more comfortable talking about the things that mattered to them and mm-hmm. have that one-on-one time with the parent. So those are kind of the things that I did as a parent on the subject
Yeah.
of communication. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
And again, my children are a little bit younger than yours, and so they're going through this